Imagine standing at a funeral, surrounded by silence, grief, and strangers, when suddenly a single moment of kindness changes your entire destiny. That's exactly what happened to one humble single dad who thought he was only helping a frightened pregnant woman, but just 1 hour later, he learned he had inherited $10 billion from someone he didn't even know. Before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe so you never miss powerful stories like this. The gray clouds hung heavy over the small cemetery as Daniel Reeves, a 36-year-old single dad, stood quietly near the back, holding a single white rose he intended to leave at his late mother's grave after attending the general community memorial service happening nearby. He wasn't supposed to be there. He had only come because his shift at the construction site was cancelled due to rain, and he decided to visit the cemetery where his mother rested, but as he arrived, he noticed a funeral taking place with barely 10 people attending, all somber and unfamiliar. Daniel stayed at a distance, wanting to be respectful yet unable to ignore the sadness radiating from the small group, especially one young pregnant woman with trembling hands, standing alone with an umbrella that kept flipping backward in the wind. She looked overwhelmed, exhausted, and deeply heartbroken. Instinctively, Daniel walked over, gently securing the umbrella and steadying her as she nearly stumbled. She blinked at him with tear-filled eyes, whispering a quiet, "Thank you," though her lips quivered like she was carrying more than grief, fear, loneliness, and a heavy burden that went beyond the funeral. Daniel introduced himself softly, explaining he didn't want to intrude but couldn't ignore someone struggling, especially someone expecting. She inhaled shakily, telling him her name was Julia and that the deceased was her estranged grandfather, a man she barely knew but chose to honor because he was the only family member who had ever shown her kindness during a difficult childhood. Her parents had cut ties with her after her pregnancy, and she felt ashamed for being here alone. Daniel listened with patience, offering gentle words that made her shoulders relax little by little in the cold wind. When she began to wobble again, he guided her to a small bench under a bare tree, shielding her with his coat despite the rain soaking his shirt. His own tragedies, losing his wife during childbirth and raising his 7-year-old son, Liam, alone, made him understand what fear and isolation felt like, so helping her wasn't charity, it was natural. When the burial ended, Julia tried to stand but gasped in pain, clutching her stomach. Panicked, Daniel steadied her again, refusing to leave her side even when she assured him it was probably nothing. He insisted on calling her doctor, offering to drive her home afterward. His kindness made her tears flow anew, something about the sincerity in his eyes, the steadiness in his voice, the absence of judgment. As the rain grew heavier, he held an umbrella above her while letting himself get drenched, waiting until she could catch her breath. After a long moment, the funeral director approached with a sealed envelope addressed to whomever shows compassion today, explaining that the deceased had left unusual final instructions. Daniel and Julia both exchanged puzzled looks, but Daniel declined the envelope, insisting Julia should receive it since she was family. The director shook his head. The letter's instructions were extremely specific, and Daniel was the one who matched the description. Confused but respectful, Daniel slipped the mysterious envelope into his jacket pocket, unaware that this small act of kindness, simple, instinctive, pure, was about to change his life in a way he never could have imagined. After the burial, Daniel walked Julia to his old pickup truck, carefully helping her settle into the passenger seat and making sure she was comfortable before driving through the rain-soaked streets toward her small apartment. She insisted repeatedly that she didn't want to inconvenience him, but Daniel kept reassuring her there was no inconvenience in helping a fellow human being who needed support. As they drove, the windshield wipers rhythmically slapped back and forth, creating a quiet soundtrack that made Julia feel strangely safe, confessing how alone she had felt these past few months with no one to lean on. Daniel shared a soft chuckle and told her how he once attended a parenting class filled with mothers, being the only father in the room and feeling utterly lost but determined. She laughed for the first time that day, telling him he seemed like a strong man, both in heart and spirit. He shrugged humbly, saying he just tried to do right by his son Liam. When they reached her building, Daniel insisted on walking her up the stairs despite the slippery steps, and once she was safely inside, he checked her kitchen to ensure she had food. Seeing mostly empty shelves, he quietly excused himself, ran down to a nearby store, and returned with groceries, milk, fruit, bread, and some prenatal vitamins he remembered from when his wife was expecting. Julia's eyes reddened again, overwhelmed by the fact that a man who had known her for less than an hour was showing more care than most people who had been in her life for years. While she rested, Daniel finally opened the mysterious envelope from the funeral director. Inside was a handwritten letter on the crisp stationery of an extremely wealthy businessman named Theodore Wainwright, a name Daniel recognized only faintly from news headlines about massive global companies and charities. The letter was shockingly personal, explaining that Theodore had wanted to be remembered not by titles or wealth but by the impact he could make with one last decision. He wrote that he had spent his final months observing life from afar, visiting parks, hospitals, community centers, and yes, even cemeteries, searching for someone who embodied genuine compassion without expecting anything in return. He wrote that if Daniel was reading the letter, it meant he had displayed the exact kindness Theodore hoped to witness before his death, kindness freely given, not because of wealth or recognition, but because of heart. Theodore stated that he had prepared 2 sealed documents for his lawyer, one naming a successor to receive his fortune, and another naming no one, depending solely on whether he encountered an act of pure selflessness in his last days. Daniel blinked, stunned as he read the final line, "If you are the one, then the world is now partly yours to shape with compassion. You, Daniel Reeves, have been chosen to inherit my entire estate." Daniel nearly dropped the letter, his heart racing as he struggled to absorb the impossible words. A knock on the door startled him, Julia holding her belly, worried because he had gone quiet. He showed her the letter with trembling hands, expecting her to laugh or assume it was a mistake. But she didn't. She read it twice, then looked up with wide eyes, whispering, "Daniel, this is real." Yet Daniel refused to believe it. Why would a billionaire choose him, a man struggling to pay rent and buy school shoes for his son? Still, deep inside, he felt something shift, a quiet fear, a growing disbelief, and the strange weight of possibility settling on his shoulders. 1 hour after the funeral, almost to the minute, Daniel found himself sitting in the office of Theodore Wainwright's attorney, a sharply dressed but warm-eyed man named Mr. Halden who confirmed everything in the letter with legal documents, notarized statements, and financial summaries that made Daniel dizzy just looking at them. Julia had insisted on accompanying him, saying no one should face something this overwhelming alone, and she sat beside him with encouraging presence despite her own exhaustion. Mr. Halden explained that Theodore had been observing the community quietly for months, searching for someone who embodied the values he cherished most: humility, empathy, and courage. Daniel's actions at the cemetery had been recorded discreetly by Theodore's private staff, not to invade privacy but to validate genuine kindness. The footage showed Daniel ignoring the rain, ignoring his own discomfort, and focusing only on helping a struggling pregnant woman without any expectation of reward. Tears burned Daniel's eyes as he realized how profoundly one simple act could echo. When Mr. Halden officially announced that Daniel Reeves was now the sole inheritor of an estate valued at $10 billion, Daniel felt his breath freeze. He wasn't a man built for wealth or power, he was a man built for early morning shifts, packed lunches for his son, and the quiet ache of missing his wife every night. He whispered that he didn't deserve it, but Mr. Halden responded calmly that perhaps that was exactly why he did. Julia held Daniel's hand, telling him that maybe the universe had finally decided he had suffered enough loss and deserved a miracle. When Daniel walked out of the attorney's office, the gray sky had finally cleared, revealing soft rays of sunlight breaking through, the kind his mother used to call heaven smiling. His mind churned, not with fantasies of luxury, but with thoughts of securing a better life for Liam, helping Julia through her pregnancy, supporting charities, and creating opportunities for people who had been overlooked like he once was. As he stood beside his truck, Julia suddenly gasped again, clutching her stomach harder this time. Daniel's heart nearly jumped out of his chest, but her doctor confirmed over the phone that these were stress-related cramps, urging her to rest. Daniel gently placed his coat over her shoulders, insisting he'd take her to his home so she wouldn't be alone, promising she would always have support from him and Liam. Tears spilled down Julia's cheeks, happy tears this time, as she whispered that maybe kindness truly circles back in the most unexpected ways. Later that evening, holding his son in his arms and looking at the now unopened box of legal documents on his kitchen table, Daniel understood something profound: the $10 billion wasn't the miracle. The miracle was that kindness, pure, quiet, uncalculated kindness, had been seen, valued, and rewarded by a man who had tried to leave the world better than he found it. And now, it was Daniel's turn to do the same, for Julia, for his son, for strangers he would never meet, and for every soul who needed a reminder that compassion can reshape destinies. And so, his new journey began, born not from wealth but from the heart of a single moment at a funeral where a simple act of kindness echoed loud enough to change the course of his life forever. If this emotional journey touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more powerful, life-changing stories.